Hey there, Chad here with another episode of Kerbal Space Program in 2021. This is episode 14B, which is a continuation of the manned mission to the moon. There will be one more episode to complete the moon mission, but please enjoy. Thanks for watching. Next up is circularizing that orbit. We still have 607 meters per second of delta V. Should be more than enough to bring this into a circle. Yeah. A little too much there. Okay. We'll take that. That's a 38-second burn. Way more than we need. We have plenty of fuel for that, what I'm trying to get at. So we're still sitting on 3,000 meters per second of delta V based on our staging and our current fuel loads. That's not a lot of room for error, but it's certainly not a huge problem. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm going to go ahead and warp. Actually, I'm going to warp in just a second. Just to give you an idea, so getting from circularized orbit around Kerbin to the moon takes roughly 1,500 delta V. And that means getting down to the surface of the moon. 1,500, and then you're talking about roughly 800 to get back to Kerbin. So we're inside a window, a little closer than I would have maybe liked, but it's not an impossible task. If nothing goes horribly wrong, it shouldn't be a problem at all. Let's go ahead and warp here. That might be way too close, actually. Well, too late. Okay, my bad. Okay, and we need to start that right now. Okay, so decelerating to circularize an orbit around the moon. Yeah, it's coming into place. There we go. Almost there. And I'm going to try to kill this a little early. Right there. Let's see how we did. 16,000 meters by 11,000 meters. Not bad at all. Okay. Now, I want to pick a nice sunny spot to land so that we can see stuff. And there's this really big crater here. I do not want to land here. I have tried that. This is a valley, and it's very cool. They've done a great job with the surface on this game. One thing to note, though, I do want to say this. The terrain on the poles of pretty much all of the worlds gets really jagged. I read somewhere where it has to do with trying to do the extrapolation of a flat surface onto a sphere for the automated processes that we use to generate, planets and worlds in video games. I don't tend to land on those. They are their own biomes. There's parts of them that are their own biomes. And some of the more advanced stuff you can do with Kerbal is you can set up like space telescope. It's not a telescope, but it's a sensor that you can put in orbit around the planet, and it will kind of highlight where different biomes are and things like that. It's very cool. It's not something I've done a lot of. I tend to like to go and put satellites in orbit around things. It's kind of what I'm interested in. But I know that my son has dropped lots of hardware on the moon, built bases that generate fuel, things like that. So many cool things you can do with the game. Even today, 10 years after it released, it's just utterly amazing. And of course, Kerbal Space Program 2 is coming soon. Sometime in 2022 is what they're telling us. Based on today's industry, it's hard to say that it'll make a date that they put in stone from, probably about a year ago. With that said, I'm very hopeful and I'm certainly looking forward to it. Part of the reason I did this whole series was thinking that there would be people wanting to learn Kerbal Space Program before KSP2 comes out, maybe refresh themselves on some of the newer stuff, like these navigation nodes down here. Again, I've been playing this for 5 or 6 years now and never knew about that because it wasn't there 6 years ago. That probably came out in one of the patches or updates, and not something I knew anything about. So again, thanks to the viewer who saw that. Now, with that said, let's find a place to land. I think I'm going to aim for right around here. This will be sloped some. I've got a pretty good base. I think I'll be okay. The other thing I could do is maybe aim for something over here. What I've found is craters tend to be pretty smooth with their slopes. So when you're not in a crater, it can be a little more rough. And what I mean by that is it's not as predictable. You have a general sense that the lowest point's going to be here in this big crater, and the highest points will be on the edges, which makes sense, right? So it could be a pretty steep slope there, though. There's a cliff here, although maybe that would make it not quite as bad. Maybe it's a little flatter on this side. Let's go ahead and try to land in there. What the heck? So what I'm going to do is I have 339 meters per second of delta V left in that stage, so I'm going to use it. And basically I'm watching this number here until it gets to 339. A little too much. Okay, right around there. I'll tell you what, that is way more than I thought I would have. I was kind of expecting this to maybe put us down here. This is going to get us really close to what we want to do. So I'm going to move that some. As you can see, there's looking at it from an angle makes it look very different from where the orbit would be. So that's what we're actually looking at. And then because of the maneuvering you do to slow the rocket in that, I'll probably end up landing somewhere around here is my guess. But that's what we're going to go for. Okay. So maneuvering the rocket, the ship, I guess I should call it a ship, set on that node or waypoint. I kind of get my terms confused a little bit. So I've used 60% of my monopropellant. Now the good news is the monopropellant mostly with what I'm doing is really there to just help align things. So it's doing its job. And as the ship gets lighter and lighter, as pieces fall off, you don't need as much of it. So the next big drop will be, I'm going to let this go and it's going to smash into the moon. Probably be using very little monopropellant to make adjustments after that. In some landings, I have used monopropellant to help with the descent stage as kind of a fine adjustment to help slow it down just fractions as opposed to the engine, which puts out a lot more power. Of course, you can throttle your engines. You can change how much thrust they're putting out at any particular time. That's a lot of steps to do while you're in descent. You don't want to lose track of how high you are and things like that. I've done that more than once. It's not fun. Okay. So let's see. Do we have a countdown here? I'm not sure if we do. I think we want land. We're not close enough yet for it to register the landing. All right, that's fine. So 4 minutes to that node. Now we're 30 seconds from that node. Let's speed that up just a little again. Okay, and 3, kick it. I'm literally going to run this engine dry, so I don't really need to watch that. Truth be told, I could kill the node. It's just at this point, it's just physics, right? When the engine runs out, it runs out, and that's where we're going to be. Now I'm seeing there is just a little bit, so there's a little bit more delta V in the engine than what I had the node set at. Part of that could be because we're losing weight. The amount of propellant weight is leaving, things like that. So that will adjust it ever so slightly. And there it is. And we'll cut that guy loose. Now, just as a test, I'm going to go ahead and fire the next stage, which will fire these two engines if it works the way it's supposed to. And then I will immediately cut them. In fact, I'm going to drop it way down so that it's not a huge factor. Yep, those look good. Okay. We now have a landing spot, and we'll hit it in 1 minute and 40 seconds. It's not close enough to measure a slope on where we're landing at, but that's okay. So I'm going to kill that node. We're done with it. In fact, we won't be setting another node until we're heading back now. So at this point, it's just a matter of piloting. I use both views myself. There's our stage floating away from us. It will eventually hit the surface. Its arc is going to be a little broader, be more like out here, probably. I'm going to go ahead and lower the gear by hitting G, and you'll notice all 4 of those come out at once. Nice wide. They're crooked. Well, that's on me. I did not set those up quite as well as they should have been. But should not affect us. Now, what I want to do is set retro, because I stopped paying attention long enough that I almost got us killed. Again, you don't want to have to think about too many things during descent. That's where we're going to hit. I don't think we're going to slow down fast enough, so I'm going to fire the next stage to help with that. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have killed us. That was my bad. There's the sound of the pieces hitting the surface, which is a little silly. I'm going to go ahead and turn this engine off now. So that engine is now disabled, and we'll just use the ones that I intended. I think if I hadn't turned that one on, it would have been really close. I don't know that we would have run out of fuel. I'm sorry, distance before slowing down, but it was going to be way closer than it needed to be. So you can see our thrust to weight is 4.16 to 1. And what I'm doing now is kind of managing this number right here, vertical speed. I want to keep it under 6 meters a second. Ideally, I want it under 1 meter per second. And from NASA standards, you want it at, a couple of centimeters a second. And right now I'm doing all or none on the engine burn. So truth be told, I probably should do a little bit more controlled. So that's enough power right there to slow us down. We would eventually start to move away from the surface. In a perfect world, you line it up so that that number, you touch down just as that number hits 0. I do not have that kind of control, though. Like I said, I want to keep it under 6 for sure. Also, we can see now we're going to be landing at a 10-degree slope. That's a little more than I would have liked, but I'll take it. And I'm going to speed up our throttling just a little, and now slowing it down. And cutting the engine. And Turning off the RCS, and we are on the surface of the moon. And with that, the Kerbals have touched down on the moon. Now, in Earth's history, this is about the point where Walter Cronkite exclaimed, "Oh boy," and broke down a little bit, very uncharacteristic for him. But man reaching the moon and safely landing on it was an incredible feat. There's no two ways about it. I think this is a good spot to stop this episode, and we will pick up the mission in episode 14C. So thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying this, I would really appreciate a comment, subscription, and a like. Any of those you can do for me, I would really appreciate. But beyond that, thank you again for your time, and fair travels.